Another advantage proposed by the abolishing of Christianity is the clear gain of 1 day in 7, which is now entirely lost, and consequently the kingdom 1/7 less considerable in trade, business, and pleasure, besides the loss to the public of so many stately structures, now in the hands of the clergy, which might be converted into playhouses, market houses, exchanges, common dormitories, and other public edifices. I hope I shall be forgiven a hard word if I call this a perfect cavil. I readily own it's been an old custom, time out of mind, for people to assemble in the churches every Sunday, and that shops are still frequently shut in order, as it is conceived, to preserve the memory of that ancient practice. But how this can prove a hindrance to business or pleasure is hard to imagine. What if the men of pleasure are forced 1 day in the week to game at home instead of the chocolate houses? Are not the taverns and coffee houses open? Can there be a more convenient season for taking a dose of physic? Are fewer claps got upon Sundays than on other days? Is not that the chief day for traders to sum up the accounts of the week, and for lawyers to prepare their briefs? But I would fain know how it can be pretended that the churches are misapplied. Where are more appointments and rendezvous of gallantry? Where more care to appear in the foremost box, with greater advantage of dress? Where more meetings for business? Where more bargains driven of all sorts? And where so many conveniences or incitements to sleep? There is one advantage greater than any of the foregoing proposed by the abolishing of Christianity, that it will utterly extinguish parties among us. By removing those factious distinctions of high and low church, of Whig and Tory, Presbyterian and Church of England, which are now so many grievous clogs upon public proceedings, and are apt to dispose men to prefer the gratifying of themselves, or depressing of their adversaries, before the most important interests of the state. I confess, if it were certain that so great an advantage would redound to the nation by this expedient, I would submit and be silent. But will any man say that if the words whoring, drinking, cheating, lying, stealing were by Act of Parliament ejected out of the English tongue and dictionaries, we should all awake next morning chaste and temperate, honest and just, and lovers of truth? Is this a fair consequence? Or if the physicians would forbid us to pronounce the words pox, gout, rheumatism, and stone, would that expedient serve, like so many talismans, to destroy the diseases themselves? Are party and faction rooted in men's hearts no deeper than phrases borrowed from religion, or founded upon no firmer principles? And is our language so poor that we cannot find other terms to express them? Are envy, pride, avarice, and ambition such ill nomenclators that they cannot furnish appellations for their owners? Will not heydukes and mamelukes, mandarins and patshaws, or any other words formed at pleasure, serve to distinguish those who are at the ministry from others who would be in it if they could? What, for instance, is easier than to vary the form of speech, and instead of the word church, make it a question in politics whether the monument be in danger? Because religion was nearest at hand to furnish a few convenient phrases, is our invention so barren we can find no other? Suppose, for argument's sake, that the Tories favoured Margarita, the Whigs Mrs. Tofts, and the Trimmers Valentini. Would not Margaritians, Toftians, and Valentinians be very tolerable marks of distinction? The Procini and Veneti, two most virulent factions in Italy, began, if I remember right, by a distinction of colours in ribbons. And we might contend with as good a grace about the dignity of the blue and the green, which would serve as properly to divide the court, the parliament, and the kingdom between them as any terms of art whatsoever borrowed from religion. And therefore I think there is little force in this objection against Christianity, or prospect of so great an advantage as is proposed by the abolishing of it. It is again objected as a very absurd, ridiculous custom that a set of men should be suffered, much less employed and hired, to bawl one day in 7 against the lawfulness of those methods most in use toward the pursuit of greatness, riches, and pleasure, which are the constant practice of all men alive on the other 6. But this objection is, I think, a little unworthy of so refined an age as ours. Let us argue this matter calmly. I appeal to the breast of any polite freethinker, whether in the pursuit of gratifying a predominant passion, he has not always felt a wonderful incitement by reflecting that it was a thing forbidden. And therefore we see, in order to cultivate this taste, the wisdom of the nation has taken special care that the ladies should be furnished with prohibited silks, and the men with prohibited wine. And indeed it were to be wished that some other prohibitions were promoted, in order to improve the pleasures of the town, which, for want of such expedients, begin already, as I am told, to flag and grow languid, giving way daily to cruel inroads from the spleen. It is likewise proposed as a great advantage to the public that if we once discard the system of the gospel, all religion will of course be banished forever, and consequently along with it those grievous prejudices of education which under the names of virtue, conscience, honour, justice, and the like, are so apt to disturb the peace of human minds, and the notions whereof are so hard to be eradicated by right reason or free thinking, sometimes during the whole course of our lives. Here first I observe how difficult it is to get rid of a phrase which the world is once grown fond of, though the occasion that first produced it be entirely taken away. For several years past, if a man had but an ill-favoured nose, the deep thinkers of the age would some way or other contrive to impute the cause to the prejudice of his education. From this fountain were said to be derived all our foolish notions of justice, piety, love of our country, all our opinions of God or a future state, heaven, hell, and the like. And there might formerly perhaps have been some pretence for this charge. But so effectual care has been taken to remove those prejudices by an entire change in the methods of education, that with honour I mention it to our polite innovators, the young gentlemen who are now on the scene seem to have not the least tincture of those infusions, or string of those weeds, and by consequence the reason for abolishing nominal Christianity upon that pretext is wholly ceased. Lastly, it is proposed as a singular advantage that the abolishing of Christianity will very much contribute to the uniting of Protestants by enlarging the terms of communion, so as to take in all sorts of dissenters who are now shut out of the pale on account of a few ceremonies which all sides confess to be things indifferent. That this alone will effectually answer the great ends of a scheme for comprehension, by opening a large noble gate in which all bodies may enter, whereas the chaffering with dissenters and dodging about this or the other ceremony is but like opening a few wickets and leaving them ajar, by which no more than one can get in at a time, and that not without stooping and sidling and squeezing his body. To all this I answer that there is one darling inclination of mankind which usually affects to be a retainer to religion, though she be neither its parent, its godmother, or its friend. I mean the spirit of opposition, that lived long before Christianity, and can easily subsist without it. Let us, for instance, examine wherein the opposition of sectaries among us consists. we shall find Christianity to have no share in it at all. Does the gospel anywhere prescribe a starched, squeezed countenance, a stiff, formal gait, a singularity of manners and habit, or any affected modes of speech, different from the reasonable part of mankind? Yet, if Christianity did not lend its name to stand in the gap, and so employ or divert these humours, they must of necessity be spent in contraventions to the laws of the land and disturbance of the public peace. There is a portion of enthusiasm assigned to every nation, which, if it has not proper objects to work on, will burst out and set all in a flame. If the quiet of a state can be brought by only flinging men a few ceremonies to devour, it is a purchase no wise man would refuse. Let the mastiffs amuse themselves about a sheep's skin stuffed with hay, provided it will keep them from worrying the flock. The institution of convents abroad seems in one point a strain of great wisdom. There being few irregularities in human passions, they may not have recourse to vent themselves in some of those orders, which are so many retreats for the speculative, the melancholy, the proud, the silent, the politic, and the morose, to spend themselves and evaporate the noxious particles, for each of whom we in this island are forced to provide a several sect of religion. To keep them quiet, and whenever Christianity shall be abolished, the legislature must find some other expedient to employ and entertain them. For what imports it how large a gate you open, if there will always be left a number who place a pride and a merit in refusing to enter?